Hey ladies, this is Christina. So, first, I'm not very good at this, and Ashley asked me to do this, and so I said yes. But she wanted me to go over Philippians 4. I think it was 1 through 9. And I just want to focus on the verses that stood out to me and what they meant to me, or what I thought that Paul was saying. I think the biggest one was 4, where it says, "Always be full of joy in the Lord." I think that went so well with Kendall's sermon about joy. So when I read that, all I could think about is the fact that Paul was writing this letter to the Philippians while he was sitting in a prison cell. And how his writing just reflected being joyful. I mean, he was sitting in a prison cell, but he was writing all these things to the Philippians, and he wasn't sad, and he wasn't mad, and he wasn't complaining or anything. And he just says that he rejoices, and he says to rejoice in the Lord, and he models it for us, and he models it for them. Of course, all I can think about is this year and everything that has happened. It's been a tough year. There has been sickness. There has been death and loss and just so many things. But through it all, I think we should rejoice in the Lord. The Lord is good no matter what. And when we focus on Him, and when we pray and just give thanks for everything, when we think about the things that Paul went through and was going through and still wrote this letter to the Philippians, that should shift our thoughts to being thankful, to being joyful, knowing God, having Him in our lives, pursuing Him, thinking that He endured so many awful things and suffered so that we could be set free. Like Kendall said in this past Sunday sermon, that alone should bring us joy, knowing that He did all of that for us so we could be free. This year for me has been a roller coaster, and there was definitely some really sad times in my life this year, but at the same time, God has blessed me so much in my family, and I'm just so thankful for knowing Him and just for being joyful even in those sad moments in my life. At the beginning of the year, I lost my grandfather, and then I also lost someone that was like my grandmother. And so those were two huge people that I admired and loved so much, and I lost both of them this year, and that was tough. But of course, there's also good things that happened. I was engaged, I got engaged, and I got married to a man that I love, and that's a big blessing. And then 2 days after my marriage, I got bit by a snake, a copperhead. So that definitely was crazy. But even through all that, like even whenever I was sitting in the hospital and all that, I didn't sit there in pity, and I wasn't thinking, oh, poor me. I just kept thinking about how good God is, and how just how good He is. I kept looking at our pictures from the wedding, and I kept seeing my husband and my kids, and just I was so thankful, and I was just so happy. And so this year has been crazy for me, for a lot of people, but even through all those things, I think when we focus on Him and we think about the things that He's done for us, that should bring us joy. no matter what we're going through. On verse 6 it says, he also tells us to not worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. He tells us not to be anxious. He tells us to tell God what we need and thank him for everything. And in return, we will experience God's peace, which is far more wonderful than any human mind can understand. And whenever I read that, I remember one night, a few months ago, my daughter Sophie, she was heartbroken over something that had happened, and she was so anxious and couldn't sleep. And so I remember I took her in my arms and I prayed with her. And I prayed for this anxiety to go away. And when we were done praying, I would never forget how she looked at me and she said, Mommy, you know that knot that you get in your throat and in your stomach, and it's like you want to cry? And I was like, yes. And she was like, whenever you prayed, after you prayed, it just completely went away. Like, it was like magic. It was just gone. And it's like I can breathe again. That's what she said. And I told her that was experiencing God's peace. So I think that's one of the most, I think I'll remember that for the rest of my life, and being able to experience that with her was a blessing. Living anxious free comes when we remember that our Creator is in complete control. And sometimes we forget that. Let me see. On verse 8, he says, he tells us to fix our thoughts or dwell in whatever is true, honorable, right, pure, lovely, and admirable. I think that we live in a society where purity is not popular. Purity is rejected as like old-fashioned, and profanity is accepted as a normal part of this modern world. Paul tells us to be on guard against the world's assaults on purity of our thoughts, and to fill our minds with what is good, and our words and actions will follow suit. So whenever we fill our minds with things that are good, our actions will show it, and our words will show it. He tells us to just think about good things in our head, in our mind, to anything that is pure and lovely, and not to put anything that is negative and ugly and mean-spirited, any of those things in our heart, to guard our hearts, to guard our minds, so that we can do what is right. On verse 9, to end it, he tells us to keep putting into practice all we have learned from him, what he's written in this letter, what he's showing us, what he was showing them. That if we do that, the God of peace, he tells them to practice, to literally build a habit of obedience, which is hard sometimes. But he tells us if we're able to do that, if we're able to be obedient, if we're able to do these things in this letter, that the God of peace will be with us. So that is what I got out of this passage. And I hope you all have a great Christmas, and thank you for listening, and I hope I did okay. All right, bye.